you think we have democracy and liberty and freedom in this country, I suggest you run for office and see really how far gone we are in this country.
Politics is a war. I grew up with that, you know. In my home, my dad and my uncle, they would argue so bad that my uncle would get up and storm out of the house and say, I'm never coming back. And the next Saturday, right there drinking beer, talking politics again.
You know, here we are in 2020. Nobody could have ever estimated that 2020 would have happened like this with, you know, George Floyd and the Baltimore investigations and things like that. We're seeing systemic corruption all across the nation. Does it start in places like Quartzsite, in situations like this?
You know, I never really thought I would see stuff like this in small town America. I could kind of understand it in a large scale, in a much larger organization where you've got thousands of police officers having small groups of individuals that are corrupt. But in small town America, I didn't think it would happen. But the more I peel back those layers of that onion and I start to realize the intricacies of people and how they're connected behind closed doors, I realize this can happen anywhere, and it's sad. But what you need is strong people with strong moral turpitude that are willing to step forward to stand up to that, and you don't allow those things to happen.
This is Detective White with the Arizona Special Investigations Unit. This is a criminal interview pertaining to criminal allegations made against Jeff Gilbert while Chief of the Quartzsite Police Department. And if I could have your full name?
William Ponce. Alejandro Rubalcaba.
Ruben Villafaña.
Herlin Yeomans.
James Charles Kemp.
Stephen Frakes.
Heriberto Dominguez.
Linda Sue Conley.
And why don't you have confidence in the chief?
He asked us to target individuals, which happened to be individuals that were the political foes of the people that he had aligned himself with, which was the council.
It's just his, to my belief, it's his political involvement in the town, telling us to target people in the community, you know, make arrests, make traffic stops, you know.
Well, he personally told me, I need you to go and get, you know, Vito Austin. You know, I need you to go do something about him. But I mean, I know where he was coming from because I guess he was voting for the people that was against the people that he's in favor with.
So the chief actually asked you to find out his voting status?
Yes, because he was voting, I guess, for Mayor Foster.
Has he ever said why he doesn't like these people?
Pretty much because they're outspoken in the community. They're basically not afraid of him.
Did the chief ever direct you to conduct traffic stops and either arrest or cite anyone?
He has numerous times he's called me before, my personal cell phone, and told me, you know, this person's drinking, you know, at a certain, you know, bars around town. As soon as he leaves, I want you to stop him.
Okay, and who was that person?
It would be Mayor Foster, and it would be Jennifer Jones or Jack Jones. And there's another gentleman, Jerry Wilcox.
Why did you write the letter?
I wrote this letter because I believed in what this letter says, and I believe that our chief of police for the Quartzsite Police Department is way out of control.
The thing that interested me the most about this story was hearing that there was a dirty police chief. You know, for me, all roads led there, because that's where all the questions were answered. Like, who was being arrested? Why were they being arrested? How was he getting away with it? Or was he really the one giving the orders? And if not, what was the real motivation? And probably the biggest question that started this entire ball rolling was, how long had all this been going on? And that's what led me to the answer for all of these questions. That's where the answer to the entire documentary took shape, which of course is money.
I mean, it's always money, right? Follow the money.
Well, I know what democracy looks like in 43 countries around the world. So you can imagine how blown away I was to find out that the worst civil rights offender I've ever seen was actually in my own country.
Oh my gosh.
And this isn't some major city like Chicago, LA, something like that. I mean, this is a tiny little town of 3,500 residents nestled in the middle of the desert. And this is not a happy ending story. right? Just so you know that before we get started, all right? Because, I want to make sure everybody's expectations are leveled and managed. It's the journalist in me that kind of needs to make sure we lay the groundwork for balance.
Yeah, I understand.
So I used to be a travel show host. I released 3 seasons of Travel Geek documentaries, which totaled 24 episodes and a dozen or so feature-length films from 43 countries on 4 continents. While traveling around the world and making these films, I was also a university professor. Over the course of a decade and a half, I taught at 7 universities in 4 countries in subjects related to journalism, photography, and filmmaking. In my last year of working at the American University in Bulgaria, I heard about the van life and bus life movement going on in the US, so I decided to build out my own live-aboard production vehicle, pick up my dad, who's also a photographer, videographer, and head across the states for my very first Travel Geek documentary to be filmed and released completely in my home country. The trip was unbelievable. My dad and I joined forces in this sort of father and son documentary about filmmakers hitting the road, filming the bus life from the insider's perspective. And it was from this rubber tramp community that I first heard about this nomad mecca called Quartzsite, Arizona. I thought, this is definitely going to be the best place to wrap the film. So I went out in the desert and I got all these really great interviews with people living in their buses and vans. And then I went into the Chamber of Commerce for one final interview, my very last interview of the entire documentary, when I met Shanana Rain Golden Bear. She gave me a really great interview about the town that was full of murder plots and crazy police activities and mysterious questions of millions of dollars in taxpayer embezzlement. And I was blown away. I couldn't believe it. At a town the size of maybe 1/10 of my hometown, which is already small, there's stories of corruption and murder plots and civil rights violations reserved for cities hundreds of times its size. And it was that day, probably even that moment, that I decided that my Travel Geek documentary was nowhere near as important as the untold story of this town. But probably what's most important about having spent the last 2 years doing this film is that I never could have guessed that 2020 would provide me with one of the most timely moments in American history to tell the story. But here we are.
So what's up with the camels in Quartzsite?
There's a lot of strange connections in this story, and one of them is the history that dates back to the 1850s with a camel trainer named Haji Ali who trained camels for the U.S. Army. They decided to use these camels as kind of like their mascot when the town incorporated. And you see these things honored in various types of sculpture work all over town.
It became really obvious that the camels were going to be our mascot.
They got a grant. What the heck was that? Oh, the welcome signs coming into town. They don't even put welcome to Quartzsite. It just says Quartzsite. And one is at each entrance of coming into town. Now, I was a home builder for 35 years or 30 years in Colorado. So I got, after they said it cost over $500,000 to make these 4 things, I was kind of ticked off because it was like, what? That's absolutely insane. There's only 3 yards of cement in there. And the granite that you use doesn't cost that much. And, planting some flowers and putting in low voltage lighting, please, how could they be $125,000 each? My calculations were those things cost about $20,000 each. And I would have been making about 10 grand profit.
They spent several $100,000 on engineering studies, but they couldn't show us a copy that it even existed.
They paid an engineer $400,000 in 1 year, and the engineer never even did anything.
Shortly after I came on council, this very same engineer, his company submitted an invoice to us for payment for $30,000 that I questioned because we'd fired him. So why are we getting an invoice for $30,000? Well, in previous councils, it would have just gone through.
There were examples of strange spending habits with engineering all over town.
I looked at the budget of Quartzsite. We had a $10 million budget. I couldn't see any big buildings. There were big projects going on in town.
It turns out that between the former newspaper reporter Bob Miller, a local business owner named Jenny Mills, and a local airstrip maintenance tech named Rocky Birch, they found out that many of the town council members were absolutely on the take.
We hired a private investigator to uncover as much as we could about the trail of the money.
First you have the crime and then you have the cover-up. The cover-up's usually a lot more interesting than the crime. And that's what was going on there. But these guys were absolutely corrupt, all of them.
What type of corruption are you referring to? I mean, were they taking money? Were they...
Yeah, they were taking money and appropriating it for themselves and nepotism, hiring their relatives illegally and squandering the money that they had, that budget.
They found the money. There's a loan fund called the HERF for highway repairs.
They had been borrowing money from this HERF fund, and that was not legal.
And Quartzsite would get so many dollars of HERF money that had to be used for repairs. So city council didn't take them too long to figure out how to steal that money. They borrow from the HERF fund and never pay it back.
I had found a $182,000 error, and I took it to a council meeting, and I was asking questions, and boy, they shut me down real quick.
I'm Jenny Mills, owner of Al's RV Park here in Quirky. I'm a full-time resident. I had asked Laura about $173,972 discrepancy.
It was not fully expended, only about $800,000 of that was expended, as I recall, and there is no shortfall.
There was no interest charged on that loan or anything while it was the last few years that it's been.
We've been making payments on that.
Right, but
yes,
it's still a large amount.
There is no shortfall.
Your time, your 3 minutes. Ms. Mills, your time is up, please. Thank you for your input.
Another extremely important factor to consider is Quartzsite's geography. Quartzsite sits along a major drug corridor that delivers more drugs from Mexico and California to its surrounding states than all of its neighbors combined. It also bisects a major route that connects Mexico to every contiguous state all the way up to Canada.
It's right on the border with California, and it's a major interchange between LA, San Diego, Arizona, Mexico. There's routes that go through Quartzsite to get to all those locations.
And 95 is a pathway up through the Intermountain.
You get it through Quartzsite, you've got I-10, Highway 72, 60, 95. You've got all directions once you hit Quartzsite, the hub.
It was about this time that recording device technology was getting better and cheaper and more accessible, and social media was really blowing up on the scene. So as the attempts to uncover the truth became more sophisticated, the town's efforts at hiding that information became more brazen.
So I hear that there's this big bust, and I think, oh good, I can write up a story for my newspaper about this big drug bust.
Per witness reports, the best example of this was actually all captured on police body cam footage right behind Town Hall.
Jade got arrested one time for trying to do a story on a car that was being torn apart back here in the parking lot.
So I go to Town Hall to wait, because you want that picture. Newspaper wants that picture of the perp coming out of the car, right? You want the perp walk picture.
But these plastic tote bins, I think there were 5 of them in the car.
So I got arrested for trespassing because I was in the back parking lot instead of the front parking lot.
Jim, she's been told she's under arrest for trespassing. Okay. Refusing to get out of the car.
And the officer had them stacked out on the ground, and they were filled with money. Now, I don't know how much money you get when it's all bundled up in a tote this, like that. But those bins were filled with money and drugs.
I called dispatch, and I had dispatch on the phone, and I said, listen, can you send a sheriff just to supervise us because I don't feel safe. I do not feel safe, and they're not letting me leave.
They put everything back in the car and took it away, right?
And then I called Mayor Ed, and I said, Ed, can you come over and take the keys to my car?
She called me, I went over there, and she was locked up in her van. They were trying to arrest her.
I tell the dispatch, I said, okay, the mayor's here now. I'm going to hang up the phone. I have a witness. I'm going to get out of my car now.
Jennifer, you have been told you are under arrest. You're giving a lawful order to get out of the police, out of the car now. Now, I don't care, Jennifer, now. You are under arrest. Now. Do you know what a police officer looks like, Miss Jones? Now.
And she got out of the van and threw her keys across the parking lot at me.
Step back or you will be arrested.
I want an explanation from you, sir. I'm your boss.
Miss Jones, you are under arrest. Do you understand that? Okay, then you get out of the car now or we will enter the car.
I just wanted to make sure it was documented with 911. Just wanted to make sure it was documented with 911, and I'd like I called the mayor to come get my keys.
Well, he's not allowed to get your keys.
I got out of my car and I tried to toss my car keys to Ed because, again, I was concerned something might be planted in my car or I might not be able to get my car back or something.
Ed!
No. Stop. Oh.
Ed, get my keys! Get my keys, Ed! Those are my keys! I gave him permission to get my keys!
Do not interfere with me.
Those keys were given to me.
Ed!
And I stepped on her keys and the chief shoved me off the keys and actually did take her van.
And Gilbert dove. I mean, like it was a football going into the end zone. Gilbert dove across the pavement to grab the car keys before the mayor could pick them up. And they impounded my car. And then they arrested the mayor.
And I got arrested for interfering in police operation.
They wanted to impound the car. See, that was part of making people pay.
Jade went up there to the police sheriff's department in the booking process that I got to be familiar with. And the drug dealer come in and he sat down for a few minutes and then got a call and he left. And they decided there was no charge. Now, whatever happened to the car and the drugs and the money they found, gone.
Somebody had too much to lose, or some buddies, because really pulling off this kind of thing is something that you don't do alone.
I mean, how bad was what they were really doing that warranted shutting people up?
But I do suspect that it had to do with development and who might benefit from that development.
There were bags of cash that went back and forth between engineers and town folk,
And from what I can tell, he was concerned about a lot of irregularities that he saw at town hall.
I got W-2s for 50 employees for last year. How many employees do we have? 42 then. And I went back and looked at the financial records of the town. And out of 5 weeks at random that I picked throughout the year, or 5 paydays, out of those 5, 3 of them, they had cut 52 checks.
That, I think, was his whole concern. The town was being mismanaged, and he wanted to do something about it.
We have 8 to 10 checks disappearing with no names on that we can't find the names.
Of course, the people that were in charge didn't want him doing anything about it.
And since then, that's when all this really horrendous acts on their part have come up.
As far as I can tell, there are 3 factors that make Quartzsite's story explosive. The history, which dates back to the early settlers and what, of course, those settlers and traders came here for, which is the mining and gemstone business. The geography, which includes its location out in the middle of nowhere, and also kind of being a watering hole between Los Angeles and Phoenix, something like 125 miles from the nearest town of any notable size. And of course, the insanely quirky characters that comprise its population. The characters that wind up in Quartzsite are largely attracted to the first 2 factors, so I guess we can start there. What kind of personality is attracted to the nomadic lifestyle and those that end up here? There's Loretta Warner. She's the vice mayor of the town. She also happens to be an ex-Secret Service agent or something like that.
Quartzsite personalities. That is definitely an interesting question.
Okay.
There's a squeaky-voiced local newspaper reporter.
It's just this little, quirky little town in the middle of nowhere. You don't think anything happens, because that's what everybody thinks. It's a sleepy little Quartzsite. Nothing happens here. But if you look back and you start peeling back those layers on the onion, you start realizing what's really going on here and what's gone on. It's crazy.
Thank you very much.
Those of us that live here during the summertime, we're considered the oddballs.
Vroom, vroom.
It's a wide spectrum of who comes here.
Everything. There's no stereotype. I mean, I've met the full gamut of personalities and people and from places. I mean, there's no stereotype at all. It's a true melting pot.
There's something really special about Quartzsite.
Then there's Rain Goldenbear, the litigious tabloid editor with facial tattooing who pretends to be a Native American.
Well, you've met Rain. Okay, she's an eccentric character.
There are sacred sites around Quartzsite, and Quartzsite is in the middle of those sacred sites. So people may be feeling that there is something special and they don't even know what it is.
There's also a veritable army of quirky locals that add to the very unique flavor of the town.
Have you met the naked bookseller? One of Quartzsite's most well-known residents. He was actually a musician and a comedy writer.
Before I became a naked bookseller on the main street of Quartzsite, Arizona, I spent 25 years as Sweet Pie. I was a naked boogie-woogie and blues piano comedy cabaret performer who worked starting in Vermont in the ski areas, branching out through all New England, into colleges, beach resorts, and coast to coast, and north and south in all the provinces of Canada. And we ended up here, much to my surprise, a town willing to tolerate a naked guy in a G-string selling books on Main Street. Makes Quartzsite a pretty unusual place.
He's a character. Characters like that find homes in Quartzsite.
We're gonna hug a cactus. And I mean, this is Ash Jack the movie. We're gonna do this thing the right way, or we're not gonna do it at all. I love you, Arizona.
Ow, God damn it, that's gonna leave a mark.
God damn it. Don't try. Is it home, kids? Oh, how am I gonna get out? I'm impaled here. I'm impaled.
Merry Christmas. We're going all out for you here, guys. I mean, all out. Have some mistletoe.
Is there something in the water? Or in the heat? It's crazy.
But one of the biggest problems, as my witnesses told me, was not outsiders looking to profit from Quartzsite's unique qualities, but rather an insider looking to exploit the town for his own interests.
Like all small towns, we have, to use the expression of our town attorney at the time, we have a great white swimming instead of a shark in an ocean in a swimming pool. Like big fish in a little pond, we have a great white in a swimming pool.
Well, he's down at the car yard there next to Lifestyles. You can find him there.
That great white wanted certain things to happen and was used to doing certain things a certain way. And when life made that great white accountable, that person didn't like it and set in motion a whole bunch of other things, most of which were destructive, all of which camouflaged what the great white was doing.
So, are you talking about the chief or are you talking about the mayor?
Neither.
Oh. No, I'm intrigued.
He is still in town and runs a business here in town.
You know the classic car business that's here in town, all those classic cars that are around? Well, that was the person that really drove this town for a long time. And that's the energy that drove what happened.
That's like the source of it.
Yes.
way this town got incorporated is wild, crazy, it's screwed up. What happened was they needed to get some kind of waste treatment system in here, and they decided the best way to do that was to create a town.
They realized that they could get funding to create a sewer plant by becoming a municipality, and they did. That is how the town became the town, to a great degree.
I think they could have created a district, a water district, a sewer district, but they decided that they needed a town, a municipality, and of course that's good for real estate values. So they started, I believe, a referendum, and they need to get so many signatures to get people to agree to want to be governed with a new government, and people weren't going for it. People were like, I don't want to incorporate this area. This place is great. We don't need more government.
Well, there's no question that particularly in desert communities of Arizona, water has premium value, and the control of water has huge economic and political importance.
It was the sewer that drove the whole situation.
If you own the water rights in a desert town, you own that town. There's no other way to say it. When I put all the disconnected witness statements together, it seems like puzzle pieces to a larger picture that always circled back to the water treatment plant.
The short version of what happened was there was a lot of concern over water rights. And of course in the desert, that's a big deal, right?
He wanted it. He wanted the sewer.
I know that some people in Quartzsite viewed that as a shadowy backdrop to the whole controversy.
A new one, not a fixed.
No, he wanted the sewer. He wanted to own it.
So they go out there and they get signatures. It's not working. They're not getting the signatures. So what they decided to do was stage a break-in of the office of the people who were doing it. Richard Oldham, Bob Cappy, and the newspaper guy, Jim Lloyd.
He just, misrepresented facts to everybody, hurt everybody he touched.
Very powerful man, very political.
And he's made a phenomenally good living at it. He's wealthy on account of it. But he's hurt a lot of people in the process.
So a newspaper guy writes up a story. People break into Richard Oldham's office and steal all the signatures. Then they go out in town. People said, well, if that's the way they're going to play the game, I'll sign that thing. And that's how they got the signatures to incorporate Quartzsite.
He's always somehow been involved in politics, whether it's indirectly or directly.
When I first came to Quartzsite and people said that Richard Oldham was kind of like the puppet,
The puppeteer.
manipulating a lot of the people.
Richard always wanted to be a big-time politician.
I did not believe it because I've never experienced anything like that.
And the sad thing about it is, if Richard would have just told the truth, he could have probably been the governor or a senator. But it got to the point nobody could believe him.
What happened in Quartzsite is an unpopular man years ago got elected as first mayor. In his dealings with being the mayor of the town, he wanted to get a better water system plan for the town. He also included his property.
By many accounts from the witnesses I interviewed for this film, Richard Oldham is the con man responsible for scamming the town into incorporating in order to usurp the county's water rights. Not only to feed his RV parks, but also to snub the board of supervisors that sat on the panel in the late 1980s.
It all started on a lie. It's not gotten any better since.
I heard that they did it over the summer when nobody was around.
They always do it over the summer when nobody's around. The people clearly at first weren't for it, but they had to create this story to get people angry. And it worked. You got a town. It's been a disaster from the beginning.
It's been the sewer from day one.
Throughout this lineage of events, Oldham had attempted to become the county supervisor, and when that didn't work, it's rumored that he tried to buy the water treatment plant from the county or buy the rights or something like that. And when that didn't work, he allegedly tricked the town into incorporating so that he could at least control the water. But when there was resistance, that's when the rumors started that the water treatment plant was damaged and needed replacing.
The problem with the plant was maintenance. We took a tour of the plant, the council did. There were some cracks around the edge of the ponds. And these were like hairline little cracks in big concrete. It was no problem at all.
Nobody really knows where those rumors were started or how they came about, but out of those rumors flowed a huge number of studies by ADEQ.
We became visible to the ADEQ, Arizona Department of Environmental Quality.
They're coming in and saying, you've got safety issues here. OSHA was in here too and said, you've got safety issues in your water treatment plant, your sewer plant.
In fact, ADEQ said their testing of soil, there were no subsurface leaks in those ponds out there.
So there was nothing wrong with the plant?
Nothing wrong.
You asked me what caused the real fragmentation that everybody saw. It was looked at as a money-making concern.
And that's when it was said that that early council had taken out a bunch of loans and illegally supplanted her funds and all of these other things in order to put the town into arrears so that it could go belly up.
Why would someone try to tear down a municipality?
The real goal was trying to bankrupt the town.
Break them to the point of, hey, let's go bankrupt.
And if it went belly up, of course, it would need the savior.
And if they'd have done that, somebody could have bought the waste treatment plant for pennies on the dollar.
The former mayor had offered the county to bail them out of a lawsuit.
He was the first mayor, and he was fine with it because he could control all the money was spent and that sewer.
So there's been unrest ever since the town became a town.
They called me the founding mayor because I worked real hard to get to the unincorporated. Mostly for water and sewer is what my object was.
And so what does the big fish in the little pond do? He tries to control that oversight. If that doesn't work, then he tries to fragment it.
The people who were afraid of Richard appeared to me to be legitimately afraid. I mean, they were really scared of Richard.
So it's fear, not putting themselves out there. It's an actual fear.
Yeah, I would say it probably is.
He owns property in the county, and on this property are multiple unmarked wells. He could throw me in a well, I would never be found.
There was a huge amount of fear that we had to battle.
This wasn't a feigned fear. This was, if I wrong Richard, I could end up dead.
I actually have been threatened. My business, my life have been threatened.
The lady that lived here, we used to babysit her kids, was murdered. They couldn't find her body anyplace. And all of a sudden it shows up a week or 2 weeks later. And I had questions then, and I still don't have answers for them.
Why won't anybody just say that? It seems like a pretty easy thing to say.
Because he's still lurking out there and he's litigious.
If you check with the Secretary of State, you'll find there's a lot of people sued Richard Hoy.
He sued his own mother.
He sued his mother at one time.
Oh yeah, the guy is a real
highbinder. And she sued him after he pilfered her retirement account.
Do you mind saying who that was?
I'd rather not.
Okay.
You have to be careful about what you say and how you say it.
Do you feel comfortable saying who that is?
I'd probably rather not probably say it.
Fair enough.
With Richard Oldham, I wouldn't even want to try to venture a guess or a comment.
I've seen all the paperwork. I've seen it from day one, and I've known this is the situation, and he knows I know it.
This entire story is basically a huge conglomeration of conspiracy theories. There's a hidden conspiracy theory behind that conspiracy theory. And in this case, there's alleged to be a puppet master pulling the strings of the puppet master. The person rumored to have been driving Richard Oldham was a woman by the name of Deborah Ireland, aka Deborah Helton, aka Deborah Oldham, aka Deborah Prince. She had at least a handful of aliases that I was able to find in my background checks.
Now, I don't know how she ever got tangled up with Oldham, but they deserve each other.
Those guys, oh my goodness, Richard Oldham and Deborah and all them, they spent every waking moment dwelling into everything they could dig up. And they take the tiniest little thing and blow it into a gigantuan thing. And, you know, it was pretty scary. It was like, God, guys, give it up, give it a rest, you know, and they wouldn't. So, you know, after a while, it was like, what's true and what's not?
She was running from somebody when she came to Quartzsite.
The mystery is that Deborah's not her real name, and nobody knows what her real name is.
She knew a lot she didn't want to tell me about. So.
Somebody thought she was in witness protection, you know?
You'll never get information out of Deborah. She's a smart cookie. She won't tell you nothing.
She's paranoid as hell, I don't know.
Richard thinks everybody's after him. And he's probably got the right to think that. But it's an illusion. Nobody's after Richard. Nobody wants him.
They're probably the most two paranoid people in Quartzsite. Them two, and they really don't have any reason to be. You know, I mean,
nobody's going to kill him. Nobody wants to hurt him.
Well, you know, also if he had his phone sitting there, Deborah was listening to everything. They record everything. You know, they thought I was recording them, but I never did.
I did interview Oldham. He refused to sign my release, and I spent half an hour telling him I'm not going to like manipulate what you say. That's the only reason not to sign this is because you think I'm going to do something to you. And he just would not sign that thing.
That's his girlfriend probably sitting there in his ear saying, "Don't sign nothing." You know?
So I just, if I got to sign this, we're in trouble.
He probably had an earplug in with her telling him.
He's a strange guy, you know.
Right?
No. Did you hear a word I said?
Yes. But I got this damn Facebook thing is going again.
I know. Tell Sam to turn off Facebook.
I mean, you go in that sales office over there and it had all kind of bugs in it, and she was up there in the house recording everything that went on down there.
Camera off, mute, and mute's not on, flip. End. I don't want to end, do I? Conversation with D. Oh, there's a little D. Is that how do I turn that thing off?
That's for the first time for you.
Camera off.
Yes.
That does it?
Now it should be really cool.
Add all these ingredients up, and you have a recipe for disaster.
They were fighting over City Hall, and the fight really got dirty.
The town was incorporated, and Oldham became the first mayor. And then you get the mess with Rex Bird, who was the mayor that won. And when he won, that was when the mess of, him being jailed for trying to kill the other, Oldham.
reason that we're all here today, and will be here for the next couple of weeks, is that this defendant is charged with being the hidden moneymaker behind a secret plan or an agreement, a conspiracy, to hire a hitman to murder another human being.
When this town was incorporated 28 years ago, roughly.
It's a very complicated, weird story, and someone did end up going to jail.
The original mayor, the original incorporator, was Richard Oldham. He was the mayor that they supposedly killed. The other mayor, I believe, is deceased, the one that was supposedly killed him.
That was Rex Bird. He was the mayor of Quartzsite at the time. He and Oldham had been feuding.
So Rex and Oldham had this dispute over a well that Oldham contracted Bird to dig a number of years before the incorporation, probably in the late 70s, perhaps early 80s.
It kind of all started when Richard wanted him to drill a couple of deep wells on his property. And he drilled them, and it was a bill of about 50 grand.
And Oldham didn't pay him for it.
So after he got them drilled, Richard put a camera down inside the casing and showed moisture inside that casing.
Oldham didn't like the quality of the work.
He had his attorneys write Rex and tell him that they was losing upper water into the lower aquifer and contaminating the well, and he wasn't going to pay for it.
There was a dispute.
When actually it was condensation in the pipe.
There was a lawsuit. Oldham won the lawsuit.
But he just got the wells for nothing and screwed Rex. And that started friction. Rex did things right.
You know, if the facts actually were and could well have been that Rex dug the well, Richard wouldn't pay, you know, maybe it's fair to say that those bad feelings were more on Bird's part than Oldham's part.
Rex Bird was a ex-contractor. He was a 32 or a 33 degree mason, honest man, good guy.
Rex Bird was arrested, and the charge, I believe, was conspiracy to commit murder.
It was the only time in La Paz County that a group of protesters came and actually picketed outside on the sidewalk out by the courthouse.
And we had the front of the courtroom cordoned off. It was kind of like a circus out there, you know, with the news people and everything.
The courtroom was packed.
And this thing went to trial, and it drew international news. We had correspondents from Great Britain there. I can remember. I covered the whole trial.
There was one group saying "Free Bird."
Free Rex Bird innocent, that sort of thing.
We kept them pretty well away from the front of the court.
But I've been to a lot of trials, a lot of hearings in La Paz County, and I've never seen a courtroom that packed. And the way it kind of panned out, Robert Bacon allegedly got with Rex Bird, and the two of them conspired to murder Richard Oldham.
The FBI set up a sting, and it went through the whole deal of the makeup and showing him dead in the desert and showing the photographs.
He drove into a trap that the police had set to catch the man who had secretly agreed to pay $7,500 for what looked like a murder.
They took Richard wherever they took him.
They had him, I think, by a tree.
They took Oldham out to the desert. There was an actual Polaroid photo, which I remember from court, where they took Richard Oldham out into the desert and made him look like he had been murdered.
Of course, you know, Richard was fine and it was all a setup, and they arrested the vice mayor who'd become the mayor.
Richard Oldham, when he testifies, will tell you that made him real nervous.
Later on, I believe the verdict was vacated.
Bob Moon reversed that case.
The judge overturned the conviction on the grounds he said that some of the witnesses were not convincing.
Primarily because of the utter lack of credibility that Bobby Bacon demonstrated.
The state's star witness got caught lying on the stand throughout the entire trial.
He did do some time in jail.
And gets out after his prison sentence is served, comes back and then is reelected as mayor again in Quartzsite.
The judge overturned the conviction on the grounds he said that some of the witnesses were not convincing, because the witnesses weren't reliable. So,
depending on who you talk to and where their alliances lie, either Oldham framed his political rival to get him out of the way so he could get back into town hall, or Byrd really did try and have Oldham killed for this decades-long beef they had.
Bacon either conspired with Oldham to set up Byrd, or he conspired with Byrd to kill Oldham.
Is it in fact true that that was a setup?
Yeah, I think it was. The only one that believed it wasn't, that Richard was actually harmed, was his mother, Rosalie Wheeler.
He went to jail, and he got out a year later, and then he died of cancer right after that.
In either case, Byrd died less than a year later, and Oldham's still alive, so.
You know, even at his advanced age, when I first saw him, I thought he looks like a pretty tough hombre.
If Rex Byrd wanted to kill Richard Oldham, he would have killed him himself.
You know, he looks like a guy that's maybe an ex-boxer.
I was there. I worked with the private investigator out of Phoenix. I had a lot of involvement there. It just didn't happen.
You know, that kind of had that kind of look about him.
Do you think that had an impact on his health?
That killed him.
I do recall seeing Rex Byrd at a later point thinking, man, he doesn't look good.
Oh, sure. It cost him a lot financially. And it sure took a burden. I mean, it took a terrible toll on him. And I'm sure that's what killed him. It was stress.
It was all staged to make this, put this guy down.
Most of the town believes that Oldham put all this together to frame Rex Byrd and get him out of there.
But it was really sad because I've heard that guy who got framed was a nice guy.
I guess it worked.
Yes, it did.
Richard took from this town, Rex gave to this town.
Because of the support that half the town had for one mayor and the deep disdain they had for the other mayor.
So, as you're doing your documentary here, you're gonna find, there's factions, two sides.
That court case split the town so deeply that the chasm it left behind can still be felt 30 years later.
There was two factions, and one was backing Richard and one was backing Byrd.
There were people who were supporters of Richard Oldham, and there were people who were supporters of the other guy.
Some people don't really want this story told.
But the problem was it split the town.
Or they want a rosy version of the story told.
Well, if you're not on this team, then you must automatically be on the other team. And there was an adversarial split.
It got really ugly. Really ugly.
There was restaurants that these people would go to that these people wouldn't.
And if you didn't pick a side, your side was chosen for you, either based on who you met first when you came to town or who you were seen hanging out with.
And if you were somewhere in the middle, you didn't know where to go because there were definitely factions.
And this is the heart of the issue, right? Like there's a lot of fallout and conspiracy theories and rabbit holes that emerge out of left field.
This is the origination point for a schism in a community that continues on for another 2 decades by the time I get to it.
But the Oldham versus Byrd conflict is what set in motion 3 decades of quiet contention that grew to a crescendo of chaos and ultimately ended in tragedy.
We're like, what have you people been doing and how have you been getting away with this? And that's not legal and you can't do that and that's not right. And so people immediately on one side started accusing us of being on the other side, which we weren't.
And I come along and I told them I'm not either one, I'm the C team. And I just stepped over everybody and said, no, we got to make sense of it and change the way it was being looked at. And that's how it's changed.
To all these people that excused it, they've also damaged the local economy.
And it created, like I say, a lot of discourse, a lot of threats to the financial stability of the town.
I've seen pictures of where some of the land out here, BLM land, I mean, you can't even see the land for the vehicles.
Where they were headed was a municipal bankruptcy.
But it's still not the same environment that it was 15 years ago.
And it's destroyed our business community. We do a fraction of the business we used to do here.
It still gets that way for a couple, 3 weeks, but not as long and not as much.
We used to be a months-long season. Months. Now we really only have a few good weeks.
Do you think it'll ever return to
that? I don't think so.
Jeff would literally send cops out and they would do what Jeff told them to do with vendors, certain vendors. I know a vendor over here, Randy, he sells $1 hamburgers. He's been here forever. He had some issues.
So 2 is 5, 5 is 10, and 10 is 20 there, young man. I work all over the country, and I never have the problems anywhere that I run into in Quartzsite over the years. The city council here, this is a small town. As I understand, it's 3,400 people year-round. So there's not that many people, that even want to be on the council or mess with it. So the ones that's here are constantly here, and they got a little power base going. And so whatever they like or don't like, that's what happens in town here. It has nothing to do with reality or laws or anything else.
It did more than just damage the economy. It tore families apart. It set spouse against spouse. It took out businesses. It ran off vendors and probably even scared off quite a few snowbirds.
A bunch of assholes tried to run the town, take over the town and run it their way.
Some folks that were in power at the town came in and wanted to reconstruct Quartzsite and make it more like Palm Springs.
We had a numbskull idiot who had no vested interest in this town whatsoever become mayor.
I have plants growing in my garden with a higher IQ than Wes Huntley.
Somebody built a hat and wrote on the hat, if you can read this, you're not Wes Huntley.
He hated the snowbirds. He hated the vendors. He was bound and determined he wanted to run them off.
This contention, of course, made its way into the town hall meetings.
Been a vendor here for a little over 8 years. I've been in Quartzsite for almost 14 years.
He was screaming in the middle of the swap meet one day at the vendors and the snowbirds, calling them riffraff.
We found out that we were overcharged, the vendors. We were also harassed by the permit technician who would not give us her name. She was very rude and obnoxious to everyone there. They didn't like the vendors.
Every time I'd come here, one of the locals would try and pick a fight with me.
Things have to work both ways for everybody. I feel that there needs to be a little more communication between the vendors and working with the city and various projects.
Bite your lip and smile. They'll be gone in a couple months and you get your town back and you have their tax revenue.
They didn't like the carnival aspect of what we have.
I think there was just an overall negative attitude here because of things that were going on politically.
They didn't like the nomads coming in and out. They wanted it to be more like a Palm Springs.
When it started out, it was just a lot of yelling, you know, back and forth, council members yelling at each other.
Hal Davidson has threatened to recall any council member who does not resign.
Due to the circus created at the last town hall meeting, I do not want any reappointment by this council.
So does that mean that you are going to recuse yourself because you're working with Martin Brennan?
I don't work with Martin Brennan. Where'd you get that?
And so their whole focus when they came into power was to try to formulate Quartzsite into something that it could never be.
It seemed like each council meeting got crazier and crazier and crazier.
Do we please have some order out there, Mr. No!
People were threatening the council. The council was threatening the people.
I'll tell you what, it's obvious these people don't want to hear from you, sir. They're not interested in information from the public. You're wrong. And this is the way that we want to run our community. I don't care if it's legal or illegal. I just don't think it's anybody's damn business.
And I mean, it got rowdy.
The crowd is being a bit unruly, and we need to get on with the business. I am so sick and tired of the laughing, jeering looks of the mayor of this town.
I am asking for the mayor to resign his office.
In the midst of the conflagration, probably would have been a good idea to bring a helmet.
And there were times that people were actually taken out, and the town actually had a couple of lawsuits by people that were taken out of council.
And so out of that grew a dislike for the way that Quartzsite has always been, and an even deeper dislike, especially for the vendors.
Jennifer Jones, you know, she is a vendor. They used to harass her like crazy.
Jennifer Jones. You got about an hour? Jennifer Jones. She had a pet grooming business in Quartzsite. It was called the Fur Salon.
I want to talk about Jennifer Jones a little bit more later too. Okay. Because I don't know if you know how that all started.
I know.
Like the very initial issue that it caused the whole thing to erupt and continue to snowball.
She was one of the opponents of the group at Town Hall.
I think it kind of delves into the baseline of, I mean, that's the whole thing about what these people are complaining about, civil rights violations, things of that nature, you know what I mean?
She at one time locked herself in her dog cage so Jeff couldn't come after her.
She was very vocal in her opposition, very vocal.
And the reason she became an activist here is they searched her property without a warrant.
Hello? The police came over with the code enforcement guy and asked who I was and asked to see my vendor permit, and I showed it to him.
So Jeff Gilbert began to lose favor in the community when they illegally searched Jennifer Jones's trailer in reference to a call of animals not being taken care of, and she was a dog groomer at the time.
And I said, well, it's good until June, and I think this was April or something. I said, so, you know, what's the problem? He said, well, you can't have this business here. What do you mean? Well, you can't have this business in a swap meet. I said, well, why do you give me a permit every year? Never had any problem. I never had any complaints. I marched my dogs in the parade and taught dog bite safety to the children's after-school program and stuff. I thought everybody liked me.
They pushed her literally out of the way.
Well, they said, you can't do this. And I said, well, then can you show me the ordinance? Because I volunteer, do legislation work for one of the dog registries, and I have the state law on my hard drive. So if you have a local ordinance that I don't have, I'd really like to see it.
I thought, good, we got another one. Because at that time, I was about the only one really doing the fighting.
And he said, if I have to come back and show it to you, well, I'm just gonna write you a ticket. And I smiled and said, I want to see the ordinance. And And so rather than give me any due process, or there was no ordinance, of course, and I called their bluff, Mark Skoglund wrote revoked across my license, went right back to town hall, revoked my license per him, and called the county animal control and said I was running an illegal kennel on a revoked license and the animals were in danger. And animal control showed up, wanting to search my home, count my dogs. I asked him for a warrant. He said he didn't need one. We went back and forth. A group of people started crowding around. I called the police. He called the police. Long story short, they came in my house without a warrant, and they threatened to arrest me if I followed him in.
I think it was inevitable that either one of the vendors or one of the residents were going to get pushed too far. And in the case of Jennifer Jones, she was both. How many times did they use that in other cases?
I can't give you a specific number, but I know that they did that type of situation. It was common practice with them.
Eventually, they inevitably ran into a few folks that wouldn't tolerate that kind of treatment.
There were the people who loved the police, and then there were the people that were fed up.
Oftentimes in small towns, you'll develop cliques, political cliques.
It's the worst that you could find of people misbehaving.
And because it's so small and intimate and everybody knows everybody.
It's a messed up little town. They don't want anybody to know it, but it is.
The relationships not only become acrimonious, but they oftentimes become really personal.
And there are a lot of caring people there. There's a lot of volunteers. But boy, if they don't like you, they'll rip you to shreds. They'll snub you. They'll put you out of business. They'll do whatever they can to get rid of you.
You find a topic, they were going to argue about it, and everything was a fight. Everything.
And not surprisingly, this started grabbing attention outside town.
You're talking about a small town with people with a lot of time in their hands, and they're very politically aware and very politically active. They've divided into two sides.
Local news stations started covering the scandal.
Last Friday, Attorney General Tom Horne announced the town council had violated the state's open meeting law.
Which is about the time the lawsuit started.
Yeah, Jennifer Jones had filed 6 lawsuits in federal court against the town of Quartzsite. She added me to the last one. She also sued the town of Parker judge.
There were lawsuits. Some of them were because of violation of the open meeting law,
which further caught the attention of local, state, and regional politicians.
I have a unique responsibility to make sure that cities and towns follow our Constitution and our laws in the state, like the open meeting laws, which clearly the city has violated.
My name is Barry Hess, and I actually am the spokesman for the Arizona Libertarian Party. And we're here actually as a show of support for all of Quartzsite who are suffering under some pretty serious corruption.
I was also the foreman of the 76th grand jury when a lot of those people were brought up on trial, and the former chief of police were calling a nuisance in a public meeting as a felony, and really trying to manipulate the system.
There was lawsuits because people were taken physically out of the town council meeting.
There was a lot of, I'll do this, well, I'll come back with this legal action, well, I'll defend it. There was a lot of just trying to up the ante.
And it wasn't a bluff, they did it.
Yeah, and they would move forward with it, and that's where just a lot of the crazy litigation would come out. I represented a gentleman who called a town council member a name. It wasn't a cuss word. It was a pretty tame name, in fact, but the town council person went and got an injunction against him. It was ridiculous, but that's kind of where the status quo came in and was trying to put up any legal barrier possible, whether it was a legitimate effort or not, to try to silence these people that they didn't like.
Once these lawsuits that you and Roth and Foster and all these other people started filing and eventually winning, did their stance change? Did it become worse, better? What happened?
No, they doubled down on stupidity.
There were some on the town council side that were inept and inexperienced.
It was like, I'll see your stupid thing, and I'll raise you accountability. And then they're like, okay, well, I'll give you more stupid things then.
But there were also those that infused a measure of intentionality into their actions.
I mean, I've never seen anybody not learn a lesson the way that, I mean, literally to do more of what was causing all the problems.
Which, as a journalist, drums up a lot of questions. Like, why, in a small town where everybody knows everybody's business, would you go out and stalk and harass people who all had one thing in common, which is their political alignment?
I came into town with a friend to do some shopping or some get some groceries, and my husband calls me on the phone. And he said the police chief has been parked across the highway in the BLM, like just behind the guardrail, watching me. You know, he goes, there's no one else out here to watch. It was just us. But he was watching where we were parked, what we were doing, and we're paying him almost $90,000 to babysit people that have no prior criminal history.
He was laying across the street, stalking her business, taking notes on who came and went.
We'd have a meeting over in a RV park in the community center. And while we were having a meeting, that was before I was elected, there'd be 10 or 12 trips by with police officers down that little side road, you know, and they were surveilling us. You know, that's what their job was, to surveil the political opponents of the board, the current council. It was just the way of life in this town. You know, it was a police state.
Sergeant Frosto asked me to run a license plate, and it came back to my neighbor. I said, somebody complaining about their dog again, you know, because I didn't want them to think that, you know, because my dog barks a lot. And he goes, no, they were seen driving into Jennifer Jones's business. That's not a legitimate reason to run a license plate because a vehicle goes into a dog grooming business.
Do you think it was lack of expertise or training, or do you think it was actually being corrupt?
I think Jeff knew what was going on and was allowing things to take place.
And of course the town had no expertise in how to deal with them either.
And I think some of the individuals were just inept.
There was ineptness. Just inept management of an inept business structure that really needed some expertise.
The two sides needed titles.
Mike Roth, Jennifer Jones, Ed Foster, they were fighting the whole system.
I used to call them the resistance.
And those teams ended up being either the establishment or the resistance.
On the opposing side was, I guess, what I'd call the establishment candidates.
The players on the resistance team were Mike Roth, Jerry Wilcox, Jack Jones, who was actually Jennifer Jones' husband. There's Russell Sias, and of course Ed Foster. There was also Chance Hamilton and Vito Austin. There were definitely others, and of course they each had their individual supporters, but those were the main players. On the establishment side were Jeff Gilbert, Alex Taft, Martin Brannon, Al Johnson, Jerry Lucasen, Barbara Cowell, Patricia Anderson, and Machine Gun Joe Winslow. That fight that manifested between those covering up and those asking questions is the most important discussion in the story.
They came after us.
It all starts the same way. It all ends the same way.
We stood our ground. They retaliated again.
But in the instance of Quartzsite, it happens to have played out in a town where the circumstances were present that allowed it to be kind of hyper-focused under a microscope.
By now, a lot of people have been arrested in these.
A lot of them.
How many people do you think have been arrested by now?
Let me think. Jerry Wilcox, my husband.
Hi. Morning. How are you? Fine. Aren't you Mr. Jones?
Why?
Because I'm asking you. You are?
Why?
Are you? Yes or no?
Yeah, why?
Okay, I'm placing you under arrest
for what?
for false reporting. I don't care. I'm arresting you.
I'm on private property.
I don't care if you're on private property.
Because I have my dog down here. Lady, could you please?
No, you're placing her under arrest. Put your hands behind or it's going to get rougher. Me?
I witnessed them arrest another newspaper editor publicly at the post office in front of everybody when they could have went and picked her up at her house privately. There was no reason for them to show this aggression, this show of force.
And what am I under arrest for? No, what am I under arrest for?
Don't resist.
Take that. I'm not
Don't
resisting.
resist.
Let go of my purse. Take it to the
Don't
shop.
resist.
And my
Miss
keys.
Jones. Miss Jones.
I'm not resisting.
Okay.
Still can you run my car?
Candidate Russell Sias.
I am Russell Sias, registered voter and legal resident.
Because I knew they would all the parties would be at the council meeting. I asked Russell to serve everybody at the council meeting.
I have some things to deliver to each one of you.
Our little group set out to serve the town council and Gilbert.
And he was handing out the papers to all the different council members.
And so we had a packet of paper and I served them.
He went to hand them to Gilbert, to Jeff Gilbert, and Jeff went take them.
Is Chief Gilbert here someplace? Right here, Mrs. Sykes. Okay.
When he got to Gilbert, Gilbert wouldn't take it.
When it came to Jeff,
I have one for you too. I'm sorry, I'm not interested in what you
he said, I don't want it. Well, had I been smart, I'd just dropped it on the floor.
He went and he, back like this, like, nope, can't make me touch it.
So he poked him with them, and he got arrested.
And I didn't. I stuck it here in his arm.
And just so you got it, there's a copy of the letter that's concerned. You can take it or not.
So I wound up spending the night in jail.
Wow.
I intentionally did not make contact with him.
Russell handed it out to him, and the paper barely touched him and fell to the floor. Like Russell went, here, take it, and just went like that. And so, so then he got arrested for assaulting Gilbert, for trying to hand him an envelope with my lawsuit in it to serve him.
I wound up paying about $1,500 to get the thing shut down. And the whole object of it was harassing till he leaves town kind of thing.
Mayor Foster on the steps of Town Hall.
There's been some allegations from me that I've read in other reports of you've been harassed by the police.
We have been surveilled, followed, or at least charged with a felony crime by this chief of police. The chief was trying to go after me as a political opponent of the people in town. That's interfering in the political activity of the town.
They'd come and bully us, all hours of the day, follow us, ticket us. One day I got 4 tickets in one day.
Mike Roth, twice.
I was the first person to get arrested at Town Hall. It was on Jefferson's birthday, and I had enough. I was going to give a little speech. Never even made it there, and they went into executive session, and I made one comment. I said, he doesn't even, garner the respect of his own men. And you could just see in Jeff's face, that really irked him.
Seeing Mike Roth's arrests on various footage I've acquired for this film clued me into another interesting thing.
And he just decides to arrest me. Fortunately, there was a camera rolling.
These arrests were so frequent that Jeff Gilbert had clearly developed signs to his officers to move in and make arrests.
Steve Bennett just assaulted Mike Roth, and they took Mike Roth to jail.
I got it on tape.
Okay, I saw it. Bennett just jumped on it.
Why are they arresting this man over here?
Because he was creating some disturbance, and some lady pushed him, and Gilbert didn't care about that.
Tonight was an absolute victory because for the first time, someone from far outside of Quartzsite got to see how lawless this community has become under Police Chief Gilbert's leadership, how arrogant he was. Jeff Gilbert, along with Officer Javier Frausto, showed the community exactly what kind of officers they are. They're thugs, they're bullies. Mike Roth didn't do anything wrong. Steve Bennett pushed him. The other guy pushed Steve Bennett, and Mike Roth got arrested. Why? Just because he was Mike Roth, which is exactly at the center of what is absolutely wrong with this situation. It's not what you do, it's who you are. It's a victory.
And so they were desperate to get, punish all of us. It was like municipal whack-a-mole.
How did the town council choose its targets?
By anybody who opposed them.
If you stuck your head out, they were gonna take the mallet and they were gonna teach you a lesson for that.
There was a pattern, a clear pattern of these people. They all supported Ed Foster and his inquiry into how the town was spending their money, and they were all arrested. These were the Oldham-leaning supporters. They liked the vendors and the gem shows, and the other side wanted Quartzsite to turn into a retirement community, kind of be left alone with their Social Security checks and their nice winters.
I think they just didn't see all of this power structure coming.
But the interesting thing about the establishment candidates is that they came in out of nowhere, and they kind of started off working in the background.
They knew they had a new town manager, but they didn't know anything about him, and that was okay because, we need a town manager.
After Oldham, of course, the first was Dan Field. Dan Field definitely would have made it onto the roster of the establishment team had he still been in Quartzsite for the most recent contention. Based on news reports and witness reports, Dan Field caused huge financial problems on the county level as well as in Quartzsite.
Dan Field was an attorney who'd been like county manager, and then he was like town manager / town attorney, kind of conflict of interest.
Dan Field was the one who brought on Jeff Gilbert as the police chief.
Then that town manager brings in a police chief, and that police chief, well, we need a police chief, but we don't know, and we don't know what he's like.
There were individuals that were seeking political office or seeking to get the people that were in office out, whether they wanted to be in those seats or not. They wanted certain people out of office.
He would also ask officers to target these same individuals, telling us, hey, this individual has this problem with their vehicle. I want them stopped and I want them cited. So he would provide the actual violation and tell the officers to do this.
A lot of these people that I've talked to over the past week have said very casually, I get arrested all the time. Some of them have been arrested 4 and 5 times. The mayor himself has been arrested.
First year I was in office, I think I had 11 felony crimes charged against me.
All for disturbing the peace.
I know the allegations were made repeatedly that they've been falsely arresting people on the orders of the town and Chief Gilbert.
And some of these arrests are on video, and these people don't appear to be disturbing much peace.
Jeff Gilbert engaged in a PR campaign from the start.
Now, mind you, all this time, Chief Gilbert had coffee with cops.
He used to do these weekly coffee visits, coffee with the chief or something like that, like coffee talk with the chief, or there was some hokey little name for it.
I think it was once a month.
Everybody warm? Yeah. Everybody watching news this morning or TV? How bad it is everywhere but here, right?
Very intelligent and articulate and well-spoken.
Folks that were there, they liked Chief Gilbert. They were the older people.
He was very well liked, and even by the officers.
I believe he started there in 2006. At around 2007, the honeymoon was over.
He made them feel safe.
He was no longer the leader that we had thought he was.
He had a way about his personality that they really, really liked him.
Officer, I couldn't help but notice your eyes are glazed. Have you been eating donuts?
And he was at the right age where he could talk to the young people and get along well with them, and he can talk with the older people.
When Jeff Gilbert was the chief of police, it was almost like a no tolerance policy where they just weren't going to put up with anything from the rebel rousers.
The chief of police could not cope, and he really didn't have the experience or the background. And so what he did was he dug his heels in, and it created a terrible situation.
There is another video in which the police chief is addressing the council, and this is one of the eerier videos. It was a speech he made to the council just a few days after the Tucson shootings, and so it gave a really kind of eerie sense that maybe he will take steps beyond his usual police powers to see to it that peace is maintained.
The shooting clearly appears to be motivated by a disturbed individual who has been reported to have had distorted political views, was anti-government, did not trust or like government officials, and believed that they were just trying to cover up some conspiracy. Does any of this sound familiar to our community? Quartzsite has been plagued over the last year or so with many of the same views and warning signs.
You can see where this dichotomy was happening.
And because he was a very good talker, the council thought he was the bee's knees for the most part. And that made it doubly hard because the elected officials supported him in spite of all the uproar.
I had a very high regard for Jeff Gilbert.
He was a charismatic person, so he was well liked initially from the onset. It was very hard for the community to believe that he was not a good guy. It took some time, obviously, for that to be exposed, but it did happen.
Right after he got out of the academy, he got bumped up to lieutenant. He had no experience.
So he skipped a rank?
Yeah, several times.
He didn't have very many years in law enforcement. I think at the time he had only had 10 years in law enforcement. He had became a chief because he made it up pretty quickly.
The chief had important friends in both as post and in the DPS.
I had him in this house one time, and I thought we were bestest friends. And it's like overnight almost, he changed to a complete, total asshole. And crook, outright, bald-faced, he shouldn't have been fired, he should have been indicted.
He'd sit in his office and look on the internet. He was just on the internet all the time, looking at like airplane pictures and job applications back east in different places and stuff like that. He never did anything,
And in all honesty, when I heard the things they were saying about him, I found a hard time believing it.
And to get him away from the PD, instead of dealing with the issue, they transferred him over to the task force on the pretense they're loaning a lieutenant to the task force.
Our former chief was part of our drug enforcement task force.
People were taking him for face value. They thought that this guy was a good guy. He's coming in here and he wants to do good things and support the community.
Administration changed and they were going to get rid of him. And that's when he got hired on by Quartzsite.
But he was a wolf in sheep's clothing is what I can really say about him. He pulled the wool over everyone's eyes.
There was belief that our former chief was granting safe passage to the cartel.
Norm made the claim that the Chief Gilbert was on the take from the cartels. Was that true?
I think so, yeah. And he wasn't above that.
And I don't think to this day that he has an ounce of remorse for the abuse that he inflicted on the people that he was sworn to serve and protect.
Do you think that he believes he's innocent, or do you think that he knows he's guilty and has just, kept up a facade?
I believe Jeff Gilbert's so arrogant that he has maintained that facade for a number of years, and he continues to live in that fantasy land that he's done everything right and righteous when it's blatantly obvious he's not righteous in what he's done.
I think that he is a true clinical sociopath.
He's an expert on violating people's constitutional rights.
Then Jeff Gilbert brought on Martin Brannon.
When the town council set out to hire a new town attorney and a new chief of police, they wanted to find people aligned with their status quo philosophy.
But then again, if you had 5 people applying to fill a position, they were attracted to the person that was also the sociopath.
And people who would assist them with putting down to silencing the opposition.
Leave now. You come back in, you'll be arrested.
For what?
You move.
For what? What will I be arrested for? What will I be arrested for, you pig?
Move, Mr. Ross.
You fucking pig. Tell me what I'll be arrested for.
Move.
You're gonna get fired. Are you
Mr.
assaulting me, you fucker?
All right, you're under arrest.
For what? For what?
Do not resist.
For what?
Do not resist.
I'm not resisting. Quit beating me up.
Quit breaking my arm.
And they were able to successfully find those people in the form of Martin Brannon and Jeff Gilbert.
They used the police department as a hammer for anyone that dared to question them.
Of course, Martin Brannon was the linchpin between Jeff Gilbert and the town council.
Martin was a brilliant attorney, and that's what made him dangerous.
He was a worthy adversary. He was one of the smartest people they hired to go up against us, that's for sure.
He was known as a very unethical man. And the state bar saw it that way as well.
Once a defendant invokes their right to counsel, the police cannot initiate contact with them again.
Well, the town council wanted a hard ass to have somebody to try to legally justify all of their bad acts.
I fucked up there, to be honest.
As far as I can tell, all of this conduct has been alleged. It has not been proven. It is under investigation. I've been wrong before. I'm sure I'll be wrong again. There's only one way to prevent ever being wrong, and that's not to do anything at all.
And I admitted freely that I screwed the pooch on that.
I'm satisfied with your answers so far.
In laying that foundation in the interview, they're basically telling Martin, look, we want somebody who's going to come in and do our bidding. So he heard that, and accepted that. I would imagine when they agreed to interview him, or when they called him in for an interview, they were thinking, yeah, let's lay out our expectations and this is going to be our guy.
Gilbert actually brought on Brannon specifically to challenge Ed Foster's electoral victory.
Jeff Gilbert contacted me and said that somebody wanted to talk to me about a recall, or to challenge ballot petitions, something like that.
Jeff reached out, brought his own people in. Now he had his own attorney.
And so that was my foot in the door in Quartzsite. I should have hit the refuse call.
He is the one who drafted the changes to the town code to seek to limit the mayor's powers.
I was approached by, I think, the town manager to draft a code that would define the authority of the mayor. Primarily because Ed had this belief that he was a potentate.
He kind of became known as the henchman for the police department and the town council.
Martin will go and find that one line in there that says you can do this, and they will do it.
When the town council says, oh, we want Mayor Foster's powers limited. Okay, well, let me look into redrafting the town code, and I'll put together some language, and then you guys can pass that new town code and we'll limit his powers.
The establishment knew before Foster was even elected that he would be probing into the finances of the town.
Well, even back then, I was beginning to question the money. It was always about the money with me, you know, and talking about money caught people's attention enough to get me elected. And it's always been about the money ever since, you know. Even though I'm denied by town council access to that, it's still about the money.
And Martin Brannon immediately got to work closing off Foster's ability to make those inquiries.
I have questions about that debt, and I wish to have them answered in the public media here. What I want to know is, when was the first loan taken out against her funds?
You need to make a motion.
No, not to have discussion.
Yes, you do.
This council saw fit to take the authority away that I can't ask for a report unless I get council approval. Now I can't even bring something to the agenda without a second.
And how that showed up in town hall meetings was kind of scary.
Nobody here wants to discuss this HERF debt. 2.7 million, 1.3 of it in the last year, and how did it get there?
Yeah. Why not talk about it? Yeah. Why not bring it out in the open?
Does anyone here wish to second that motion? Okay. Nobody wishes to discuss the HERF debt. Once again, the people don't get an answer to where this HERF debt came from and where it's going to.
Martin also wrote town code to preemptively build a moat around the town council in the event that they ever were exposed and held accountable for the things they were covering up.
Did he actually make code while he was the town attorney to protect people for these future potential problems?
Yes, he did.
Al Johnson was originally brought onto the team as code enforcement.
Then you've got the guy that is the code enforcement.
He really caused a lot of problems for the resistance candidates.
You need to hire a process server and serve me legally.
Here you go, Jennifer. This is a complaint from the town of Quartzsite, and if you're not in court today, I would suggest that you show up.
Oh, so you give us a piece of paper and tell us we immediately have to go to court?
That's correct.
Oh, you can't do that. Not according to the Arizona Constitution. You cannot do that.
He would serve people frivolous court orders when he wasn't even on duty and town hall was actually closed.
You're not the legal authority to serve that on me, but whatever. Have a nice day, and I will file a criminal trespass charge against you for showing up because you've been told you aren't supposed to be here without making an appointment.
Jennifer.
Goodbye, Al.
This is Don't argue, Jade.
Property, and you don't have the same expectation of privacy.
And now you've got 3 people that are in on this power grab.
Al Johnson, yeah, he was a great one. He was a little Napoleon tyrant. He was one of those that would do anything he was told to do by the cops.
He ordered the destruction of Richard Oldham's airstrip.
Quartzsite's building inspector, Al Johnson, and police chief Gilbert forced the removal of the existing safety barriers that I had put in place that are likely to result in a tragedy. We have no means of notifying flyers of these changes, nor the dangers that are now present.
They decided that the main street here goes out there and then it went straight out to the end and cut right through his airport. And they went out there and run a road grader down the road and cut right across his runway and cut his runway up and graded his runway out.
They literally just came with town equipment and destroyed the man's property.
He would come onto people's property and shut off their utilities in the middle of sweltering summer temperatures.
We have a complaint. Business, in parking lot, no water, no sewer, no electric.
Don't need it.
Jack, just stop.
No, I'm tired of you. I'm tired of you harassing my wife, and now I'm being vocal about it.
Oh my.
Based on the information I received from my interviewees, Al Johnson and Jeff Gilbert's increasingly brash behavior was actually inspired by Martin Brennan.
You know, every once in a while you have to send out a few letters and you have to get a little tough with people, but the upside of that is you are getting their attention.
He wrote the code, they read it and said, that makes sense, and they went out into the community and they enacted these things under the guise of operating within the bounds of town code.
And he would just go out there and do all these terrible things.
I liked Martin at one time, but once Martin got involved with Jeff Gilbert, I lost all respect for him. I felt that he had sold his soul to the devil. I watched him. He was the one giving Jeff and Al Johnson the, hey, use these policies and use these procedures to get rid of these people.
Then there was Alex Taft, who made the link between the counsel and Al Johnson.
Alex Taft was the town manager at the time, and Al Johnson was the assistant town manager, and then there was Jeff Gilbert, the chief of police. And that's essentially the chain of command.
Alex Taft was part of the Martin Brannon, Jeff Gilbert status quo town council group.
The individual that was our town manager at that time had been first a palm reader, then she was a librarian, and then went straight into being town manager.
When she came to Quartzsite, she was a tarot card reader.
She literally got run out of town. I see her around the county every now and then.
She was just a thorn in my side. She was always problematic, and she was kind of the gatekeeper for a lot of stuff.
You see her riding around every time, but she doesn't make eye contact anymore.
She was another one who just would try to keep out the other side from being able to participate in public comment.
But if we're going to have the cameras on to prove the police are doing something right or wrong.
You've gone far enough, that's enough.
No, I get a chance to discuss. Don't I? I'm a citizen.
You're exceeding your time limit. Chief, would you remove that?
Wait a second. There was someone here that talked for 10, 15 minutes.
We don't need you here talking like that. Please remove
Mr. Ross,
it.
you've been given your time limitation.
The call to the public has a time limit. Can I see any proof that I don't get a chance to finish my comments?
Remove him, Chief.
Okay. Officer, take him out.
I can walk on my own. Enjoy the police state.
Jay wasn't experienced.
There were rumors that Alex was improperly doing stuff with signature pages and stuff like that.
Hi, Detective White. This is Alex Taft. We had just talked, and you know, when I pulled that original document of the request for leave form, one of the things that kind of stuck in my head is the fact that the whiteout is paint. To my knowledge, I am the only one that uses paint whiteout. Almost everybody else uses the tape type whiteout. And if you look at the document, it looks like it was painted. So if you want to call and question me further about it, that's just great. But I think that merits a comment. Okay? Thank you. You have a great evening. Bye-bye.
She was in charge of election stuff, and there was always allegations that she was messing around with some of the election stuff.
Item number 4, discussion and possible action to repeal ordinance 09-15 and an action to modify the qualifications for public office in the town of Quartzsite. Do I have a motion? There's no motion. This agenda item cannot be brought before this council at this time.
Nobody can tell what was in her mind, what her reasoning purpose was.
This report I requested is something that in my years in management, I could not have ran a department without tendering such a report to my bosses. They would have expected it. I asked to know And that earlier question about what that one check was, it wasn't a payroll check. I asked to know what we're paying for. It appears we're paying a lot of money to some people in this town. I wanted to know what's going on. I asked for a report for any pay that was beyond the contracted amount of the employee or the base pay of the employee.
A report of this nature, depending on the time frame, could tie up a lot of employee hours. Now, I have no problem doing it. The issue is it's going to take a considerable amount of time.
I saw the memo, and
okay.
Quite honestly, it's not a request that's outrageous.
When you hide things from the public,
if there's to be transparency, why is everything being hidden? What's going on?
and you won't address and answer their questions.
Why hide if you've got nothing to hide? Open up your doors. Let us look at.
There's no trust.
Once Alex Taft promoted Al Johnson to assistant manager, all that remained to complete this protective moat was to station sympathetic people on the town council.
And then you get somebody elected to the council that is in on all of this.
You know, in the old days in government, the people that were on the city council were very prominent people in the community. That changed to where you got average people on councils that may not have had the background or the administrative qualities.
They hired all kinds of people of questionable ethics and backgrounds.
When a town doesn't have a history, it's hard to go out and find quality, educated, experienced individuals.
I've always been amazed that some of the people who have been elected as to who elected these people, where'd they come from, because they came out of the woodwork and all of a sudden they're in places of importance.
And this is when it started, the need to create a power structure within the town of Quartzsite. That faction that wanted to come in and change everything wanted the power.
The situation came to a crescendo with a viral video of Jennifer Jones' infamous town hall arrest.
Well, there's a feud that's brewing in the small town of Quartzsite, Arizona.
This story is absolutely unbelievable.
Jennifer Jones is a civil activist who's attempted to call out the city council for their backhanded legislation and payroll.
It was really kind of a surreal evening anyways. I had watched them when I went into town hall earlier in the week installing cameras, and the police chief was working with them to do it. We got there, and for the first time in the couple of years I'd been going to meetings, they said, we're only allowing 83 people in because of the fire code.
We were normally off in the aisle with our cameras. They made us get in from the aisle.
How is that for? They just boarded off the library, so people couldn't stand over there?
So now all of a sudden they've grouped the chairs into tight little easily controlled groups. One officer stationed at each corner of the crowd.
They had stationed at four corners a law enforcement officer.
They were controlling the crowd so tightly, it just seemed very suspicious.
It was a takedown. It was a planned takedown.
You can see that that incident was planned.
The rules had changed, but they hadn't been put on the agenda. They hadn't been ratified into the town code by a vote.
They have changed some rules.
It was like last week, these were the rules. This week, look, we have new rules.
And they had posted on the podium, it's not a public meeting, it's a council meeting that the public can attend.
The council had given themselves the right to order someone removed.
And so she challenged that.
They want to be able to basically have the council decide who gets thrown out of the meetings. Not the mayor, not the chairman, not the CEO, not the person chairing the meeting. And I said, oh boy, I'll bet they can't wait to use that.
Chief was actually the first one, him and the sergeants. First, when I told him to back down, he backed down.
They actually walked away and she kept talking. And then they came in again.
And she began to give her speech again. And then she got, if you got that other video, you see these signals.
Everyone, this is everyone. This is a...
You know, And he went back and arrested her then.
Everyone, this is a framework. This tax is not mandated.
You are in violation of my rules of order.
All this while, the mayor's saying, you know, Officer Garcia, she has the floor. Let go of her.
Officer, that woman has the floor. You're violating my rules of order here.
And she refused to give up that microphone, and they almost tackled her.
Sergeant, I have control of the meeting. This lady has the floor. She's exercising her First Amendment right.
The mayor has
Do not resist the officer. Do not resist the officer.
Let it go, Jade. Let it go. Let it go.
Officer Patterson put me in some sort of hold where he pried my arm up underneath and he jerked me up a couple of inches off the ground even.
Don't break down. Get that picture, guys. They are violating law.
You want to call for censorship is what you're calling for, Mr. Winslow.
You only want to hear what you want to hear.
The video went viral.
We had an ally of the mayor, as we saw in the video. She tries to speak at a council meeting, and this has gotten everyone's attention.
That was from the small town of Quartzsite, Arizona, where a woman was arrested for speaking at a public town hall meeting after the mayor called on her to speak.
Between the gavels in a public meeting, that's the most protected form of free speech.
This is what has made this a national story, is the fact that Jennifer Jade Jones was speaking before the council. She was speaking critically. She'd been recognized by the council. She had the microphone. She wasn't up there very long before someone on the council said, you're done.
She was addressing two legitimate agenda items at her discussion.
And we should mention that she's been targeted by police for starting a local newspaper called the Desert Freedom Press to document all of the wrongdoings.
We're concerned about government police powers being used against the citizens.
However, when Jones took her argument before a city council meeting last week, that's when everything really came to a head.
Every day that it lingers, it looks, obviously exceptionally bad for Arizona, but for the entire country.
Worldwide, it became a visceral reaction. One lady in England said it most succinctly in an email to me. She said, how can America be a beacon for democracy in the world when freedom of speech doesn't exist in Quartzsite, Arizona? One short sentence, she captured the essence of it.
The town responded by declaring a state of emergency.
Now, that city council meeting ended with Jones being arrested, so ultimately her voice was not heard.
We saw a post on Twitter that said Quartzsite was under martial law. Now, I know the woman answering the phone because we've dealt with each other regarding paper and the arrest reports and things. So I put on a southern accent and I said, hi there, I'm thinking of coming down to Quartzsite and I heard you guys are under martial law. Is that correct? And she said very quietly after a pause, yes ma'am, we are.
And as if that wasn't bad enough, the city council held another meeting after the YouTube video leaked to the public.
What they ended up doing is having a closed-door meeting, which is against the law.
Open meeting violation complaints have been received and will be investigated.
And this time, council members privately voted to oust the mayor and declared a state of emergency.
While all of this madness was happening in town hall, 80% of the Quartzsite Police Department had decided to mutiny against Jeff Gilbert.
Dozens gathered at the Quartzsite City Hall, anxious to find out what's going on with their local politicians.
9 members of our police department filed charges against their chief for corruption.
In response, the town council had those officers fired.
What was your reaction when you heard that 2/3 of Quartzsite's police force had been placed on administrative leave last night?
Appalled. I tried to make contact with the state government agencies. People were calling me concerned for their safety, because of this, such a radical move on the part of the town administration against these officers. They were concerned that not just them might be the target, but some of the political opposition might also be targeted.
In response to that, the courts issued an injunction against the town that was supposed to prevent them from firing any other officers.
La Paz County Superior Court issues a temporary restraining order against the town of Quartzsite.
And now the town gets this restraining order that prevents officials from firing any more of its police officers. The restraining order protects them from being fired until they've had a pre-termination hearing. How well the town officials will abide by that order remains in question.
And in response to that, the town fired him anyway.
Even though there was an injunction in place saying you will not terminate your employees, he and the town attorney at the time went ahead and terminated us.
A city puts more than half its police department on leave. The officers are telling ABC 15 it's retaliation for speaking out against their boss.
Breaking and disturbing news out of Quartzsite, Arizona. 9 of the city's 14 police officers have filed complaints with the state of Arizona about the police chief's abuse of power for political gain.
Everything from lawsuit threats to death threats started pouring into the town's public email and physical addresses.
Taft read for me some of the threats that have been made online against city leaders.
Take your own town back. If they won't listen to reason, run them out of town or kill them.
The declaration of martial law effectively handed full power of the town over to Jeff Gilbert, which, by virtue of the pattern the town had already exhibited up to that point, may have been the town's original objective.
I feel that this is retaliation, yes, against the officers that signed this letter and came forth speaking out against corruption.
Tonight, there's new fallout from this now viral YouTube clip thrusting the heated battle between the Quartzsite mayor and town council into the national limelight.
The town decided that it was better for their image that they rescind the state of emergency.
She tells me despite claims to the contrary, the town is not under martial law and not in a state of emergency.
But by then, it was too late.
I think the trigger moment was the arrest of Jennifer Jones.
The coverage had, I think, reached enough people that were willing to mobilize behind the resistance candidates, and that's exactly what they did.
Jennifer J. Jones actually got on the Alex Jones show after she was arrested at the town council meeting, so this was, it was really getting big.
This stuff was making news. It was making big news.
This sounds so bizarre. It sounds like something that might have happened during the Jesse James era, and yet it's happening right now. How? How come?
The reason it's happening is because it can, because Quartzsite has been able to get away with it.
It's confirmed that a SWAT team was sent to the mayor's house to take him to a secret meeting. Jennifer Jones was there and able to eavesdrop through the door on part of it. Now, the police chief said months ago that we can't have citizens criticizing us. This will cause a Jared Lee Loughner. So they're going to use that to fully lock the city down.
It seemed like through Alex Jones, they got hooked up with Stuart Rhodes, with the Oath Keepers, and he initiated these federal lawsuits on their behalf for violation of their rights.
Let me introduce you to Oath Keepers founder, Stuart Rhodes, down from Montana. Thank you all for being here.
This is the start. We want to set the example here at Quartzsite. The eyes of the entire country are on this town.
Was it there? The Oath Keepers claim that they are supporting the Constitution of the United States.
They were part of that patriot movement that later went on to be involved in the Bundy Ranch controversy. And they took a really keen interest in Quartzsite because they had heard that there was this dictator-like police chief.
You've talked about a pattern of lawlessness in this town.
We have had so many different allegations of things that have been going on. Secret meetings, police misconduct. The town council has been using an illegal ordinance to keep its opposition from running for office.
All I want to say is I appreciate everybody coming out to support us. It's very impressive, I think. Makes me proud to be an American that you guys are out here helping us. And I took an oath in the military and as a police officer, and I take that to my heart. It means a lot. So thank you very much.
They have a whole bunch of people there.
How many people you think? I got the sign-in sheet. I bet I got 1, 2, 3, 6 pages. How many are on a page? 50 on each page.
That's 300.
I believe it might have been up to 1,000 people converging on Quartzsite.
They weren't all marching, that was the deal. How many were in the car? Right.
And a whole bunch of people, some on motorcycles, they had a rally out in front of town hall. They had a rally on the south side of town. I forget just how many of them were here.
It was a long march on a hot day. You know, I could have died that day because it was really bad.
It was extremely hot, close to 120 degrees that day.
What are some of the states that people are here from?
Well, I've talked to people from Alaska, Florida, Texas,
looks like Bob's trying to get
Connecticut,
somebody to
and everywhere in the nation.
Oh, he's wearing grandma.
In the last day and a half.
They were there to support the police officers who they felt were embattled under Jeff Gilbert. Some of them were armed.
They showed up with weapons.
They marched right up to town hall. Everyone was drenched in sweat. And there, right at the head of the march, was Jennifer Jones and Ed Foster.
All right, here we go, folks. Keep the pace.
It was very clear what their grievance was. They left no doubt as to why they were there.
They said they were going to occupy Quartzsite.
I remember one of the chants was, "Nazi Police Chief Gilbert resign."
Police Chief Adolf Hitler Gilbert demand that he resign. Police Chief Adolf Hitler Gilbert resign. Resign or be resign. Get out of your house. Get out of your car. Get out of your RV and join us.
Some of our seniors kind of freaked out about that.
Quite exciting having all these people here, huh?
It is, because I feel that they're standing behind us for what's right. We got so much corruption going on here.
Police officers take an oath to uphold that Constitution, and here's a police chief acting in flagrant violation of it. That's why they showed up.
When you swear to uphold the Constitution, I take that very seriously. Freedom of speech is in the first of that, and that's the most important one we're dealing with right now. Freedom of speech, that's what it's about. Thank you. Thank you.
The few remaining still employed police on the Quartzsite PD actually called the Department of Public Safety, which is Arizona's version of state troopers, who actually collected themselves in huge numbers in the parking lot of the fire station just north of town, apparently in the event that they needed to break up the rally or, perhaps something more serious.
It's got to have felt great for them, really, to have had the support of so many outsiders who got it.
These officers deserve our respect, and we salute them.
We really appreciate the support you're showing to our community here. It's been overwhelming, and I understand that a lot of people couldn't make it today because it was grueling out there with the heat. So really, give yourselves all a big hand for showing up and doing the walk today. Woo!
There were some positives that came out of this. One by one, the most notorious of the town leaders were eventually removed. And everybody that couldn't be fired was replaced. Everybody else, of course, was acquitted. And finally, the town began to heal.
It gained a rather ugly reputation as a result of it, which is a shame because this is a healing place.
Everybody now is determined to make this town be better. We all want it to move forward.
And this is 2020, so right in the middle of a nation racked with headlines of police brutality and corruption on the highest levels.
I think Quartzsite came before what's happening in Washington.
Public relations with law enforcement is a hot topic right now because of the place we are in this nation.
I would step back even then, and I would think to myself, you know what? This is kind of like Washington, D.C.
This thing can happen anywhere in the United States, unfortunately. It really could.
Look what we've got going on in the nation's capital. Look what we've got going on in our state capital.
It's not a Quartzsite thing, because that's kind of what you hear a lot is, oh, well, that's Quartzsite.
You have the same kind of garbage going on back there.
No, this can happen anywhere. This can happen in your town.
These are just microcosms of America.
Things getting out of control with social media, people that maybe weren't very balanced, finding a voice.
With really partisan politics and pettiness and people getting personal about it.
It's like a cancer. And I lived in a cancerous department for several years trying to fight it internally till finally it blew up.
It's like the perfect script for a movie in a nation that needs this exact story in order to see what not to do before it's too late.
I think education goes a long way, and communication goes even further than that. Because if we can have a conversation like we're having right now, because we're both human beings and we see things from different sides, I can learn something from you and you can learn something from me.
Political activism is important. But for this group of people, including the mayor, deciding to speak up,
I think that it was a really hot fire while it lasted.
they could have just accepted everything or decided the fight was too big or that they were tired.
But when it burned out, it burned itself out.
And that's what America is about.
You don't hire people based on friendships.
And I'm hoping that in future councils that they will have learned from what happened here.
You hire them based on their qualifications and experience and what they bring to the table. And when you research somebody, you need to look back and peel those layers back and determine, is this really what we want?
If we don't assert our rights, do we really have rights?
Whether it's a council person, whether it's a chief of police, a town manager.
If we don't know what our rights are, do we have rights?
Those people are going to be leading the people in the organizations or the people in your community. They're your voice.
A lot of really good people in Quartzsite have done their very best to turn that image around.
The whole atmosphere of Quartzsite has changed over the last 4 years.
And they're doing a pretty darn good job of it.
To be a much more friendly place and people get along better.
I think everyone wanted what was best for Quartzsite. That I can tell. They all wanted what was best for Quartzsite.
I worked really hard to try to keep the town together.
Every last one of them.
And so did Alex. You know, I know that people probably have bad things to say about her and me and Al Johnson.
But they disagreed vehemently as to what that should be.
All any of us ever wanted was to keep the town together.
We've got some really good people that do a lot of volunteering here.
I've known all the individuals involved on both sides, and I respect them all personally.
They got so involved with trying to destroy each other, they forgot what they were fighting over.
I think they just got into bad situations and things snowballed around them, and the rumor mill beat them up, and social media beat them up.
Destroying each other became more important than anything else. And the end result was they came very close to destroying the town itself, the very thing they were fighting over.
And the only way to fix that problem was to clean them out, which we did finally.
We have new council members that really stepped up to help.
End result is we got the best council and mayor we've ever had in the years I've been here.
It takes 7 members. One person doesn't do it. So.
Norm, he wants to help Quartzsite.
Everything's working. That's all you can say. It's working the way it's supposed to.
Fortunately, they've gotten things pretty much straightened out now. Things are working along nicely. I just hope it keeps working that way for a little while.
There's trust.
They've got enough people to get elected under the council that had enough moxie to go in there and change the rules.
Just bringing the community in with the council has turned everything around.
You've got some better people in there. You've got some more qualified people.
No business should be conducted in private.
They were assigned a town manager from the League of Cities and Towns.
We're doing it legal. We're doing it public.
that guy who has years of experience running much larger municipalities, he's not on the take in any way.
He's had 35 or 40 years worth of experience as a town manager.
He's trying to make sure that things are done right and done properly because, you know, when you hired people that had no experience, they'd do whatever they could get away with. This guy actually had a ton of experience.
And that was the council that's sitting in there, pretty much. Norm and Loretta.
It's too hard to recover from something like that.
I'm a fan of hers, big fan. I'm glad that she's doing what she's doing.
I mean, we've done it, and there are a lot of townships and so forth that look at us and say, we don't want to go where they went.
We're really happy and proud of our current chief.
I'm proud of what we've done here at Quartzsite PD.
Chief of Police. Hi, Mr. Ponce. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing, Hal?
Oh, if I told you I was staying out of trouble, you wouldn't believe me, would you?
No, I sure wouldn't.
Ponce originally got fired.
He's just been a really good asset to our community, and primarily because he's got a stake in our community.
He eventually got hired back. He's good. I like him.
And we're starting to get back to tourism and the good name of Quartzsite, and that's what we need.
That's only one piece of what Quartzsite's all about. Quartzsite is about these businesses that come in, the snowbirds that love to go dancing, and the jams and the music and the art show and all of these other things.
What makes our democracy function is our freedom of speech, is our political activism, is our participation in the system.
There's always going to be negative, but if we keep focusing in on the positive that's going on in Quartzsite, we don't have so much time to focus on the negative.
And that's what Quartzsite means to me, is that these people took the time to read the Constitution, took the time to read the town code, knew what their rights were, and decided that they weren't just going to let their rights be violated.
I thank God for what he's done here.
And if each of us took a little bit of that fire and stood up, maybe America would be a little bit different today.
What do you see for the future of Quartzsite?
I think it's just the beginning.
Oh, hey. So, before you roll on the credits on this thing's not done. This is all of it. It's still an open case.
Oh my God.
It's still an open, unsolved crime.
Oh, okay.
None of the council members were ever brought up on charges. No dirty cop was ever decertified. In fact, I'm pretty sure all of them are receiving pensions for a service of corruption, you know?
So is it still alive today? What does it look like right now?
Okay, yeah, well, you know, the town of Quartzsite doesn't exist like it was. I mean, I don't think there are citizens who are in fear of being harangued by half the police department. I don't think that's the case anymore, but there's a lot that's still percolating. For instance, the husband of a council member, the one who, you know, before they found out I was making a documentary about the history of Quartzsite rather than the tourism factor of Quartzsite, they took me out on a 4x4 trip. But when they found out I wasn't selling tickets to Quartzsite, they sent me an email rescinding their unretractable agreement in the release that they signed. You know, and both of them, husband and wife, told me that they don't want this story told. Rain Goldenbear, the sweet little hippie who owns the Chamber of Commerce, which is supposed to be a nonprofit, has a direct tie to the current council. She's supposed to be nonprofit and non-political, yet her partner has a direct impact on the votes that affect the town. I mean, she has a partner on the town council, and within 24 hours of the news breaking about my documentary, sent me a cease and desist lawsuit threat for interfering with her partner's political enterprises, which, you know, she never appeared in any of the original production footage.
God.
The list goes on. The police chief, Chief Gilbert, who skirted my calls for 9 months, called me the day after the news story with this sort of like, hoped he was getting his point across kind of directive to me, which may or may not have been a threat on my life and safety.
Okay.
Just tons and tons of stuff. I was thrown into the mix. All of this actually says nothing about my involvement in this story. There was an attempt on my life. I was actually run over right in front of the Chamber of Commerce while Rain was standing outside with a camera. And there's tons of smart, funny, really, truly, genuinely well-intentioned people there, but they're so mixed in with all these other people that they get a bad rap just along with the guys that deserve one. And that's the problem with corruption. They just happen to be there and they don't put up a fight, or they don't really even know what's going on, and they're just as culpable in the end. I mean, yeah, like I said at the very beginning, this is not a happy ending story.
Yeah, I guess not.
Told ya.